Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
Welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. I've got Caleb Blair with me today. Before we get started, this is an interview. This episode is going to be called Helping Ukraine. Obviously, we all know everything that's been going on in Ukraine. Caleb's going to probably give us a little bit more information of what's actually going down on the ground, what him and Operation Phantom Support is doing to help. So without further ado, Caleb, welcome to the show.
Keith, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, dude, it's a pleasure to highlight, man, and it's a pleasure to see fellow veterans out there. When something goes off in the world, just say, you know what, this shit ain't right. We're going to do something about it. We're going to help where we can, and taking thoughts and putting them into action. So I appreciate you taking the lead on that.
Man, I haven't done that much, but I appreciate the support, man.
Hey, you know what? You're doing something, and that's something. So you got to keep it in perspective. A little something is a little something. And those little somethings all add up to something big.
I was just going to say, and a whole lot of people doing a little something makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly. So go ahead, give us a little bit of background on who is Caleb and what was your military journey and what gets you to today.
Yeah, so I don't have probably what you would expect for the military journey, right? For a guy that you're listening to on a podcast and is doing what you would assume is cool guy shit in Ukraine, right? Nobody special. Did a little bit of time as an infantryman in the airborne community and up here in Alaska, and then got kicked out 2.5 years in. I had some behavioral issues from some childhood trauma, and then just wasn't all there and fit for service at the time. Honestly, I came out of a super rough childhood and straight into the Army at 17, and wasn't necessarily prepared for it. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, the situation that was around my separation warranted separation. There's a lot of kind of political drama involved with it, My squad leader, went out as far as to say on record that, he would have done the exact same thing that I would have done in this situation. And that, just all that to say that, I didn't have this crazy military background, right? Like I did a little bit of time in the military and got out and kind of moved on with my life. That wasn't easy. I struggled with an identity piece that was really missing there. And just because I didn't have one before the military, right? And so then I thought I had one there and wore all the stupid t-shirts and, was that typical boob for a while. And, there's a lot of people that probably, if they look at me now and then knew me back then, are laughing at little Caleb. Baby Back Blair was the nickname that I had. I got out of the military and struggled with addiction and drinking and just that typical downward spiral story that you hear about with veterans that get separated and don't really have a path forward. And I stumbled into entrepreneurship because I couldn't find a job in my trade as a carpenter that would really give me the time to take half a day off a week to go to therapy. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'll be a handyman. I'll pay my bills at $35,000, $40,000 a year and be happy and start from there. And pretty quickly I was running crews, doing kitchen and bathroom models, and just like fell in love with the hustle, with the game, with the business side of using my brain. And that was 5 years ago now. And so since then, just been all over the place. I'm an entrepreneur with ADHD, right? Done a little bit of everything. Currently, I own a marketing agency, but when Russia invaded Ukraine, I sat there for the first 3 days and shared Ukraine flags, shared the news, did what I thought was my part, for lack of better words, but couldn't shake the feeling that inaction is no better than bad action, right? Like that phrase that all it takes is for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. Right, and
darn good point.
And another phrase that came to mind is, what is the difference between those that can and those that do, right? Besides literal action, it's what they do. Not matter of if you could or couldn't, right? Or if you had the gifts and talents to be able to facilitate or do or help. If you didn't, then you didn't, and it didn't matter if you had the talents or not. They might as well be non-existent, right? It's like being, if you're Albert Einstein, but you spend your whole life drinking it away. if that makes sense, and you don't do anything with it, then you're not actually Albert Einstein. And so,
Absolutely.
just kind of like a self challenge there, I think, in a way, right? Like, there's a lot of that imposter syndrome at first, and there's still, I mean, don't get me wrong, every day, but like, especially before anything happened, right? Like, well, who are you, Caleb? You're just this kid that got kicked out of the army, you know, and like have just struggled to make ends meet since then. Have found some things you enjoy doing, right? But who are you, right? And I kind of just stepped out in faith, right? I was like, I don't know what I can do. I don't know where I'll be. I don't know what it'll come to, but however I can help, I want to help. I just want to do something, right? I just want to make myself available to the universe, to God, to divine intervention, to, you know, use me however it sees fit. And since then, it's totally become not about me in any shape or form, but just kind of the things that I guess that action inspired. If that makes sense. Like, I'm in no way, shape, or form the primary focus point of the operation, right? Like, there's so much going on. There's so many people doing such great things that I'm just trying to help share their message nowadays. It makes sense. Like, I'm
totally makes sense.
In Ukraine, I'm not doing the work. Like, I'm just trying to help get their message out there. But even just me stepping out in that little bit of action, saying that, you know, I'll do something, then kick-started so much more than I could have ever anticipated. Not that it, you know, is due to me or caused by me, but was caused by that first start of action, that first little step.
A little spark. It takes one spark to start a forest fire.
100%.
Bad analogy, but you know, like.
But it fits, right? But
yeah.
It fits. And I think that's something, you know, if anybody walks away with this, I want them to walk away with that. It's that the tiniest little spark can burn down an entire state, right? And you can be that spark, and that, you know, in your small community, in your teams, in your organizations, in your businesses, in your VFWs, churches, whatever it may be, you can be the spark that really starts something big. And you know, here we are, 7-8 weeks later, right? Crazy to believe it's been that long already, but we've now established logistical supply chains coming up through Romania and into Ukraine, with coordinating up specifically to Kiev and Bucha and Irpin and those other areas that have been hard hit up there. We've been getting our hands on as much medical supplies as we can, though that quantity has been limited. Everybody across the board is stretched thin right now. But then also, you know, humanitarian aid, diapers, formula, you know, medicine, right? Like, people are dying from diabetes and lack of cancer treatment.
Yeah, there's a lot of basic needs when you have a bunch of people leaving home.
You know, millions of people that left everything and walked away and are now, you know, not just without anything themselves, but then also tapping into and I don't say this word in a negative way, but draining local infrastructure that they then go into, right? And so Romania, Poland, their infrastructure, their pharmacies are wiped out. They're, you know, it's so much more of a humanitarian crisis than people realize, even with just the war itself, if that makes sense. And there's so many people and children that are dying from avoidable causes that don't even have, you know, necessarily any relation to trauma, you know. Whoa, that was a little bit of a dyslexic moment, I think. But combat trauma.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect that just comes out, and I'm sure, you know, you probably see the supply chain issues throughout Europe. The closer you get to, you know, France and England, you know, I'm sure there's like this, you know, logistical issue with filling those things in, because you're right, all those people in those countries, and they need medical supplies. They need their stuff at their equivalent to CVS and Walgreens.
100%. And even where we can find it, we can't buy it because there's not funding, you know? And so it's, you know, I keep wanting to point back to that. People keep saying, oh, well, the war's over, the war's, you know, it's dwindling down. First of all, that's not true at all. It's taking a break. You know, even today, we're starting to see news come out of Russian troop movements and mobilizations that are going to start making massive operations, you know, against areas like Kharkiv and Donbass and these other areas, you know, that are now becoming the true front lines of the war, for lack of better words. And just because we took a stall here for 2 weeks doesn't mean that it's over. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that it's in the rear view. And I think that a lot of Americans are currently feeling that way, right? But not even recognizing the years of rebuilding and effort that it's going to take to put everything back. We have entire cities that are leveled. People are going back home and there's nothing to go back to. And
Yeah, I was just gonna say, even with even if we like right now we're notified that the war's over and Russia's going back home. Even if that were the case, you're right. Beyond the actual infrastructure, the buildings, the roads, the bridges, everything needs to be rebuilt. You have these basic human needs that are going to happen. You're going to have logistics of people having to go home at some point. You would imagine most of these refugees would go home, and they need all that stuff now and on that journey. And when they get back home, like you said, diapers.
And not just when they get back home, but how long does it take to rebuild an entire community? I mean, literally leveled. There's nothing there. There's not a grocery store to put the groceries into. There's not, there's not refrigerators to store fresh items. There's not refrigerators to store medications that have to be kept cold, right? There's so many things that people don't think about when it comes to just basic aspects of humanity that are involved here that extend so much deeper than seeing somebody that's shot in the leg, as awful as that is, or seeing somebody that, is a victim of an artillery strike or whatever it may be. Like, that's what's grasping the forefront of the news. And because that might be dying down right now for a few days, a few weeks here, doesn't mean that people aren't, dying from other reasons that are totally avoidable, that simply are happening because of a lack of help. Right? Like, I mean, it's that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, and the people of Ukraine are going to need a lot of help for years.
Years.
The supply chain issues of just getting in and clearing the roads, clearing the building sites, doing whatever they have to do in their country to build a new home, to build a new skyrise, to build a new bridge, whatever, to get the materials, to get the people to work on it. This is something that could set, it could set back a generation. We're not talking,
about that
a couple years.
It's over. Even Kiev, where people are starting to come back into. We have a team member in Kiev right now that the missile strikes that hit Kiev last night local time to me here in Alaska, early morning for them, or just a few kilometers. So that's a mile or less from where he was at, and that's area that refugees are starting to come back into. Right, and so they're coming back into areas that aren't even safe anymore, that aren't even finished with combat, for lack of better words. There's so many other things that could be coming up, and with still such an uncertain future as to what could happen. It's I hate to say it, but who's to say they don't start rebuilding, and then the process has to start back over from ground zero because the Russians made more of an advance than were anticipated. Right, like these are all things that nobody's considering or talking about, right? And if we do find ourselves in those scenarios, we're going to be starting back from ground zero. Oh, we have to start back over because we stopped, and it's just not realistic. It's not real life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people maybe can't see that. I know as veterans, we have a unique perspective on what it takes to wage a war, and that it's not over. I mean, I served from 2006 to 2011. Both deployments were in Iraq, and, while I wasn't out there on the streets, I know we devastated that country, and it's going to be set back for a very, very long time. A lot of what you do is rebuild that infrastructure while you're there. We're talking about a war between two other countries, and we're on the outside looking in, and we're supporting how we can. But when it's all done, they've got a lot of rebuilding. So, this is a long-term thing. It's fluid. It's going to change. Things will go up and down. And I think it's important for people to realize that, sometimes there's more going on than what the media shows. So right now, one of the biggest things that you're doing is trying to get medical supplies. Is there certain types of medical supplies, or is it just funding that you're looking for right now?
So there are specific, sorry, I guess I could have been a little more prepared for that question.
That's all good.
I have a list right here of 4 specific medications that we're desperately trying to get our hands on. But what people might assume is probably accurate. We need combat trauma care. So your TCCC, we need tourniquets, we need chest seals, we need chest needle decompression kits. We need NPAs, like surgical, any kind of neurology is another high thing in anesthesia. If anybody has connections to those hospital connections that might be able to facilitate a donation to a nonprofit, we can pick it up from you and get it all the way to Ukraine. But I can give these to you to maybe pop up on the screen somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you just give them to me and I'll put them in the show notes and everything like that. That way it's listed out for easy for people.
Yeah, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here. Which is why I mentioned
hey,
that.
you know what? So would I. Medical stuff is not my kind of thing. So,
Physostigmine, Dipiroximum, Atropine, and then EpiPens.
okay,
so
that's interesting. Yeah,
are pretty in the veteran community, at least. Atropine's commonly known, and then EpiPens, adrenaline auto injections, are super needed as well right now.
Yeah, some of that makes sense, and I would have never thought about the neurology stuff and anesthesia stuff, but that makes sense. I mean, people got to have surgery, and
especially
it would suck to go through a surgery with
hospital bed sheets, and so.
Now, are those specifically like a specific size, or are those more like just twin size sheets? Just sterile, like prepackaged sterile. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Because as you can imagine, reusing blood-lined bed sheets.
Yeah, not ideal.
Isn't it's adding insult to injury at that point. It's just opening up all of those preventative care issues that should be avoided in the modern day medicine, right? We're don't need to be treating people in the dirt, for lack of better words.
Yeah, definitely not advisable. Give you the best tools you can, and it increases your survival rate. I've read things about just the survival rate of being able to airlift somebody out. Just that critical time of being able to get somebody out of the combat zone.
Yeah, they refer to it as a golden hour.
Yep.
And that's what I mentioned a minute ago. That TCCC, that combat trauma care, those are the primary functions of those such critical medical equipment. Is helping patients get through that golden hour, right? If you're suffering from tension pneumothorax, you're not going to survive unless you reinflate a lung for more than an hour, right? Unless you relieve the negative air pressure in the torso so that lung can reinflate again, they don't have an hour. If you have someone with a gunshot wound and arterial bleeding or an amputation, they don't have an hour. It's this tourniquet, it's the chest seal, it's the chest needle decompression, it's the NPA, it's all of these other combat life-saving critical supplies that make that difference in that golden hour.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you had a guy on the ground in Kiev. Is he there just coordinating logistics and funneling information back for you guys?
For the most part, he's and so much more, whatever he can get his hands on.
Whatever you can do, right?
Right, yeah. So he's currently buying groceries as often as we can get money to him, a little bit south where they're available, and then driving them back up, and then they preload them into bags, like family-sized potato sacks, and that one bag will feed a family for a week, and then they give those bags out to those areas in Bucha and Irpin, and areas that haven't had running water or food or electricity in 4 or 5 weeks, since the Russians showed up, that are just now for the first time seeing Ukrainian friendly faces again.
And any idea, how many people are really coming back to those areas now? Is it a lot of people migrating back in?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
My knowledge is going to lead me to say no. That's a factual answer, but some people are.
You would hope that a lot of people would be holding off from going back home, and light of the situation could change real quick.
It depends on how far people went. If they left the country, then not as necessarily.
Probably not, right? Yeah.
But if they just went to areas like Chernivtsi or Lviv or these other southern areas that were more hospitable to a family environment, for lack of better words, that weren't active combat zones. That's 4 to 8 hours away, and so a lot of those individuals are starting to come back because they are just within proximity.
I can't imagine making a tough decision like that. You're sitting there 4, 6, 8 hours away, and living in a temporary situation, and then decide, well, do I stay and live here or do I
Strangers'
go back home?
couches. Like, that's the reality. Is like you and your family are sleeping on the floor in a stranger's home.
Exactly. It was such a completely temporary, hopefully temporary situation, and you got to weigh that between the risks of going home to the
I
unknown.
mean, to one up it, even it's the third option is to leave the country entirely, right? To like go start a new life somewhere. To give up on everything you've ever known and to go find a new home with a new culture and a new language and a new way of life that you've never experienced and try to raise the family there, right? Like the circumstances that each one of these families and the decisions they're having to make are just heartbreaking, man. They're absolutely heart-wrenching.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's man, I know. As a parent, you're a parent. Like, I just can't imagine making that decision. It's mind-boggling. So,
No, man.
other than funds for that stuff, is there anything else that you guys are, really needing out there right now?
Like I said, medical supplies. If you guys either yourself or know somebody that works in the medical industry, even if they're just a front desk receptionist, whatever it may be, if they have a connection, if they are somebody that could walk into an office, even if it's their boss's office with a little bit of guts and a little bit of balls, right, and be like, hey, I have this organization that is actively working in Ukraine and critically needs these supplies. Is there any way we could donate a few out of our logistics and our supplies? They can arrange all the logistics and coordination. They're a 501c3. You guys will get a tax write-off for the donations. Can we help them? Reach out to us, phantomsupportukraine.org. You guys can find me on Facebook and Instagram at @RealCalebBlair. My personal cell phone number is 845-717-8049. Anybody that's watching this show, you guys are more than welcome to hit me up on my personal line and ask any questions you have. If you guys have anything you guys can do to help us, or vice versa, if you guys know people in Ukraine that need supplies that are in areas that you've heard us talking about, put them in contact with us. We'll see if we can help them.
Or maybe even an idea of like, hey, you know what? Maybe this will help. Like, reach out. Good point. 501c3. This is part of Operation Phantom Support, which Nick Valentine, I believe he founded it. I should know that.
He did, yeah. He's the
Nick was my,
president.
I think, fifth. I think he was my fifth guest on this podcast. It's been a while, but Nick's a great guy. In Operation Phantom Support, started as a nonprofit in Fort Hood, Texas, food pantry, and I know he's done so many. Like, couldn't possibly even say all the things that he's done through the nonprofit in Fort Hood for the soldiers and everybody else who's stationed there. So, this is a legit nonprofit, huge one. He's got a lot of press for things he's done in the past, and it's a no-brainer that you get involved and get tied up with Nick and kind of make another arm to the nonprofit. But I'm curious, how did all that happen? Partnering with them.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Nick, man. He's been such a great asset to our team and to our operation. We came together as just a group of volunteers with no real over anything, right? Like, I started to list a few things, and I was
No
like,
direction,
nothing.
It just happened.
And so I kind of came to him, and I was like, "Hey, Nick, I've known Nick through the Veteranpreneur Tribe, a fantastic community of veterans that is put together by Stephen Kuhn and Lane Balone. I might be messing up his last name. If I am, Lane, I'm sorry.
No, I think that's it.
And I was like, dude, I need some help. I put together this really awesome operation. We have contacts in Romania. We have trucking companies in Romania. We have a group of half dozen volunteers. Like, we blah, blah, blah. This is like 5 days in, man. I mean, like, shit happened quick, right? Like, real quick. And so 5 days in, I'm like, Nick, I really, like, am in over my head here. And I need like, a legitimate, like, boss, or, like, I need to answer to somebody. I need, like, this to have backing, right? Like, I need this to be legitimate, not just for our sake, but for the donor's sake, for the fundraising sake, right? Like, I need this to be a legitimate operation and not just a group of homies out in no man's land doing whatever the fuck they want, And so Nick was like, absolutely, whatever we can do to help you, here's everything that I have at your disposal. Like, take what you need. And leave no prisoner,
That totally sounds like Nick. When you kind of, as you were going through there, I'm like, yeah, Nick is beyond Operation Phantom Support, but all the businesses, all the things he does, he's an entrepreneur as well, and like a problem solver. He's a very good business guy, and definitely a good leader. I know he was a senior NCO, like that take charge, like this is the way I see it. This is what we can do. Here's my connections. Let's do it. Like, that's probably like the perfect guy that I know of to just get shit done.
Very much so, man.
That's very Nick Valentine right there for you.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that he's doing now for us is we're doing a special release combat box. I don't know if you or your audience know about his combat boxes, but essentially they have a subscription model business where it hosts other veteran entrepreneurs' products. And it goes out, you pay a monthly subscription. Each month you get a box, no different than like your Petco box, your Wolf box, or things like that. But we're doing a special edition 25 boxes with the best veteran-owned products that we can get. And we're going to be doing an auction on these 25 boxes with all proceeds going to the Ukraine operation. And so this leads me into two things, actually. You asked earlier what people could do. Two things that this brings the opportunity and or the idea up to do. Number one, if you guys have a product that you guys could spare 25 of them, or even just one, right? We'll have like the number one prize box, number two prize box. We'll tier them based on like value. That's okay. It doesn't have to be 25 donations, right? If you guys have a product that you guys would be willing to donate to put in these boxes, that would be incredible. The second thing you guys can do is if you own a small business, take a product, take a service, take whatever it is that you sell that you make money with, and take it and then auction it off, right? Say, so I'm a marketing agency. Here, you know what? I'll do this and I'll let other people model it off mine. I'm going to auction off 1 month of social media management for an organization, and all of the proceeds from it will go towards Operation Phantom Support, right? Like not just like the normal cost, but like my cost and everything over my cost will be going towards Phantom Support Ukraine. If you own a gun store, right? You could auction off a pistol. You could auction off a custom terracotta rifle in Ukrainian colors, right? There's so many different things that each small business owner could be doing to raise funds and awareness, other than just sharing something on Facebook.
absolutely, that's a darn good point. And every little bit helps. $25 here, $50 there, a couple hundred, 1,000, whatever.
Skip your Starbucks and set up a $5 a week reoccurring donation.
There you go. There's a lot of nonprofits that are doing that. That's a great way to support one too. Is just set something up.
We have a set up donor box on our website. Yeah. You can set up monthly reoccurring donations, even if it's small as $5.
There you go. Well, I'm going to have a bunch of links in the show notes. There's a lot of great ideas, but
you guys
a lot of ways
people
can help
through there. And so, don't feel like you guys have to get lost with 20 different links. The
all right, cool.
.org website, you'll see everything on there.
All righty, that's awesome. I will put that in there, and I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing what you guys have been doing and what you're planning on doing, because this is an ongoing need. Like we said earlier, this could be. I could see it realistically being a generational issue. It's going to take some of those things will be much more immediate once the fighting's over, but other needs in Ukraine are going to be there for a very, very long time. So
history repeats itself. Look at the rest of the Baltic region. Look at the rest of Eastern Europe. Did they recover from the last time Russia fucked them up? Not really.
It's a darn good point. And I know, guys of our age, we've seen it before, seen what happened in the 90s. We know what war can do to a country and to a region. So, they're going to need a lot of support for a long time.
I spent a year in Kosovo when I was in the service. When I was in the Army still, it's where I went for a year. And so firsthand kind of got to see Serbia, Albania, the civil war there, the after effects of it, and even there, 20 years later, there's still remnants of it. We're still taking UXOs out of attics. We're still taking. They found a JDAM that was 20 years old. On my deployment that we executed. It's it's not a stretch at all. Generational is not a stretch by any means.
Yeah, well, I was never over there, but I remember going through Kuwait before my first deployment, and going from Camp Buring to somewhere else to get some supplies. They put us in buses. We're driving down the highway, and you could see the burned out remains of armored vehicles and trucks and tanks that were Iraqi from Desert Storm that were sitting there rusting out on an old highway. And instead of doing anything about it, they just paved a new highway right next to it. This is... At that point in time, it was 17? Yeah, 17 years later, 16, 17 years later. I'm sure they're still there to this day. So, those scars of war last for a long time.
They don't
So
go away.
anybody out there that can support in any way, shape, or form, Caleb, you dropped a lot of good hints. Everything will be in the show notes. Support where you can. Share this. This is normally where I say share and subscribe and like my podcast, but this is different. Let's help some people around the world. Let's share. Let's share ideas, share inspiration. Let's donate money. Let's do whatever we can. So make sure you share this to your friends and family. And Caleb, I appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate it.